Hey there, fourth and fifth grade. Continuing on with Matilda. When we left off, Miss Honey had Matilda at her house and was telling her the story of her childhood as far as her mother died and then her father died under really suspicious circumstances as well. And when her mom died, they had an aunt come and live with them. And so when the father died, the aunt took on guardianship of Miss Honey and did not treat her very well. And Miss Honey was saying that she went away to college, and that's how she eventually got away. So, pick up here. When I went into teacher's training, I was 18, Miss Honey said. Well, you could have just packed up and walked away, Matilda said. Not until I got a job, Miss Honey said. And don't forget, I was by then dominated by my aunt to such an extent that I wouldn't have dared. You can't imagine what it's like to be completely controlled like that by a very strong personality. It turns you to jelly. So, that's it. That's the sad story of my life. Now, I've talked enough. Please don't stop, Matilda said. You haven't finished yet. How did you manage to get away from her in the end and come and live in this funny little house? That was something, Miss Honey said. I was proud of that. Tell me, Matilda said. Well, Miss Honey said, when I got my teacher's job, the aunt told me I owed her a lot of money. I asked her why. She said, because I've been feeding you for all these years and buying your shoes and your clothes. She told me that it added up to thousands, and I had to pay her back by giving her my salary for the next 10 years. I'll give you £1 a week pocket money, she said, but that's all you're going to get. She even arranged with the school authorities to have my salary paid directly into her bank account. She made me sign the paper. You shouldn't have done that, Matilda said. Your salary was your chance of freedom. I know, Miss Honey said, but by then I had been her slave nearly all my life, and I hadn't the courage or the guts to say no. I was still petrified of her. She could still hurt me badly. How did you manage to escape? Matilda asked. Ah, Miss Honey said, smiling for the first time. That was 2 years ago. It was my greatest triumph. Please tell me, Matilda said. I used to get up very early and go for walks while my aunt was still asleep, Miss Honey said. And one day I came across this tiny cottage. It was empty. I found out who owned it. It was a farmer. I went to see him. Farmers also get up very early. He was milking his cows. I asked him if I could rent his cottage. You can't live there, he cried. It's got no conveniences, no running water, no nothing. I want to live there, I said. I'm a romantic. I have fallen in love with it. Please rent it to me. You're mad, he said, but if you insist, you are welcome to it. The rent will be 10 pence a week. Well, here's 1 month's rent in advance, I said, giving him 40 pence. And thank you so much. How super, Matilda cried. So suddenly you had a house all of your own. But how did you pluck up the courage to tell the aunt? That was tough, Miss Honey said, but I steeled myself to do it. One night, after I had cooked her supper, I went upstairs and packed the few things I possessed in a cardboard box and came downstairs and announced I was leaving. I have rented a house, I said. Well, my aunt exploded. Rented a house? She shouted. How can you rent a house when you have only £1 a week in the world? Well, I've done it, I said. And how are you going to buy food for yourself? I'll manage, I mumbled, and I rushed out the front door. Oh, well done, you, Matilda cried. So you were free at last. I was free at last, Miss Honey said. I can't tell you how wonderful it was. Here's a little picture. But have you really managed to live here on £1 a week for 2 years? Matilda asked. I most certainly have, Miss Honey said. I pay 10 pence rent, and the rest just about buys me enough paraffin for my stove and for my lamp, and a little milk and tea and bread and margarine. That's all I need, really. As I told you, I have a jolly good tuck-in at the school lunch. Matilda stared at her. What a marvelously brave thing Miss Honey had done. Suddenly, she was the heroine in Matilda's eyes. Well, isn't it awfully cold in the winter? She asked. Oh, I've got my little paraffin stove, Miss Honey said. You'd be surprised how snug I can make it in here. Do you have a bed, Miss Honey? Well, not exactly, Miss Honey said, smiling again, but they say it's very healthy to sleep on a hard surface. All at once, Matilda was able to see the whole situation with absolute clarity. Miss Honey needed help. There was no way she could go on existing like this indefinitely. You would be a lot better off, Miss Honey, she said, if you gave up your job and drew unemployment money. Oh, I would never do that, Miss Honey said. I love teaching. Well, this awful aunt, Matilda said. I suppose she is still living in your lovely old house. Very much so, Miss Honey said. She's still only about 50. She'll be around for a long time yet. And do you think your father really meant her to own the house forever? I'm quite sure he did not, Miss Honey said. Parents will often give a guardian the right to occupy the house for a certain length of time, but it is nearly always left in trust for the child. It then becomes the child's property when he or she grows up. Well, then surely it is your house, Matilda said. My father's will was never found, Miss Honey said. It looks as though somebody destroyed it. No prizes for guessing who, Matilda said. No prizes, Miss Honey said. But if there is no will, Miss Honey, then surely the house goes automatically to you. You are the next of kin. I know I am, Miss Honey said, but my aunt produced a piece of paper supposedly written by my father, saying that he leaves the house to his sister-in-law in return for her kindness in looking after me. I am certain it is a forgery, but no one can prove it. Well, couldn't you try? Matilda said. Couldn't you hire a good lawyer and make a fight of it? I don't have the money to do that, Miss Honey said, and you must remember that this aunt of mine is a much respected figure in the community. She has a lot of influence. Who is she? Matilda asked. Miss Honey hesitated a moment, and then she said softly, Miss Trunchbull. All right, that's the end of the chapter. We'll stop there.